The morning sky above Washington Dulles shimmered with soft gold, the first sunlight reflecting off the polished fuselage of Flight 482. Bound for London, passengers shuffled through the jet bridge, some yawning, others clutching coffee cups, their minds already drifting toward distant destinations. It was an ordinary day, or at least it seemed to be. Among the crowd was a woman dressed simply in jeans and a navy blue jacket. She carried a small leather bag, worn, yet cared for, and a boarding pass that read, Seat 16A. Her name wasn't one that drew attention. To most, she was just another traveler. But beneath that quiet exterior lay a story that no one on board could have imagined. As she stepped onto the aircraft, she paused briefly at the doorway, her eyes scanning the interior, the rows of seats, the humming of the ventilation system, the faint whiff of jet fuel still clinging to the air. Her gaze lingered for a second on the cockpit door before she moved down the aisle. Her steps measured, almost nostalgic. She found her seat by the window. Outside, the tarmac bustled with movement. Fuel trucks, baggage handlers, ground crews waving their orange wands. The distant roar of engines echoed like thunder. The woman placed her small bag beneath the seat and fastened her belt. She looked out as if searching for something in the sky. A few rows ahead, a young boy pressed his face against the glass, marveling at the sight of another aircraft taking off. His mother scolded him softly. But the woman in 16A smiled faintly, a brief, bittersweet smile, the kind that hinted at memories long buried. The captain's voice soon filled the cabin, calm and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 482 to London Heathrow. The woman barely listened. Her eyes drifted over the clouds beyond the window, as though they held secrets only she could understand. When the engines roared to life and the plane began its roll down the runway, she closed her eyes. Her fingers tightened slightly around the armrest, not from fear, but from remembrance. For her, the sound of jet engines wasn't just noise, it was music. It was the sound of her past. At 30,000 feet, the cabin settled into its usual rhythm. Passengers scrolled through in-flight screens. Flight attendants moved gracefully with trays, and conversations rose and fell like soft waves. But 16A remained silent. The woman barely moved, except to glance occasionally toward the wing, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. Her posture was disciplined, straight-backed, not the slouch of a tired traveler, but the composure of someone trained to remain calm even in chaos. Every few minutes, her eyes flicked to the seatbelt sign, the engine's pitch, the minor vibrations of turbulence. Small details others ignored, she noted with precision. Outside, the sun dipped behind a stretch of high-altitude clouds, painting the sky in hues of orange and steel blue. The woman's reflection in the window seemed to merge with the horizon, calm, focused yet haunted. In her mind, fragments of another flight surfaced, another sky, another cockpit, her hands once wrapped around a control stick, the vibration of twin engines in her bones, the radio chatter filling her ears. Her call sign had once echoed across military frequencies, a name now retired, sealed in files labeled classified. She pushed the memories away and exhaled softly. The world she'd left behind wasn't meant to return. Not today. Hours passed. The passengers began to doze off. The cabin lights dimmed. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Flight 482 sliced through layers of cirrus clouds, the ocean glimmering faintly below. In the cockpit, the pilots monitored instruments, chatting quietly about weather patterns. Everything was routine, until the first alert flashed on their radar. Two unidentified aircraft were approaching fast from the west. The co-pilot leaned forward. "Traffic alert?" "Probably military exercises," the captain murmured, adjusting the frequency. "But that's odd. We're in civilian airspace." Outside, the woman in 16A stirred. She looked out the window, sensing something. The engines hadn't changed pitch, but her instincts, those old, finely tuned instincts, told her otherwise. Then she saw it, a faint glint in the distance. Two specks moving impossibly fast. The cabin remained calm. No announcements were made. But as the dots grew larger, streaking closer with perfect formation, the woman's pulse quickened. She knew those silhouettes, sleek, angular, unmistakable. F-35 Lightning IIs. Her breath caught. She had flown beside them once. The other passengers began to notice too. curious murmurs spreading as the jets came into view. Two gray fighters shimmering under the sun, closing in on the commercial airliner, maintaining a perfect parallel course. Camera phones came out. Laughter, excitement. "Wow, are we being escorted?" someone said. But the woman in 16A didn't smile. Her gaze was sharp, analyzing the angles, the flight paths, the insignia barely visible under the sunlight. Then something extraordinary happened. The two F-35s tilted their wings, a synchronized, deliberate movement, the universal signal of salute. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Passengers clapped, cheered, unaware of what it meant. But in seat 16A, the woman felt tears sting her eyes, not of fear, but of recognition. That salute wasn't for the plane. It was for her, the pilot of Flight 482 received a coded message moments later, a brief transmission from the U.S. Air Force Command. No explanation, just acknowledgement. Inside the cockpit, confusion turned to awe. Who was on board this flight that could command such a gesture? Meanwhile, in 16A, the woman turned her gaze back to the sky, where the two fighter jets held formation beside them. She pressed her palm lightly against the window, as though greeting old friends from afar. She had thought her past was buried forever. She had walked away from the call signs, the missions, the medals. But the sky, it seemed, never forgot her name. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to whisper, so softly no one could hear. A name she hadn't spoken since she left the service. A name once feared and respected among the elite. Phoenix. And as the F-35s broke formation and soared upward into the clouds, the passengers erupted in applause. But for the woman in seat 16A, the salute meant something deeper. A final acknowledgement from a world she once ruled. Yet she had no idea that this flight was only the beginning. Something far bigger awaited her once they landed. Something that would uncover secrets buried deep within both nations' skies. The world thought Phoenix was gone. But the sky had just saluted her return. The flight continued its steady path across the Atlantic, engines humming in calm rhythm. The passengers had returned to their seats, still murmuring excitedly about the fighter jets that had just appeared out of nowhere. For most, it was a rare thrill, something to post online, a story to tell later. But for the crew in the cockpit and the woman in 16A, that moment was anything but ordinary. In the cockpit, Captain Morris sat in silence. His co-pilot was still glancing at the radar screen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Military jets don't just salute civilian aircraft, not without reason, not without clearance. Then came the short coded message on their communication panel, a secure channel not used for commercial flights. The message contained only a few words. Acknowledged. Phoenix confirmed. Proceed uninterrupted. The captain frowned. Phoenix? It wasn't a flight code. It wasn't a distress signal. It was a call sign, a military call sign. And somewhere behind him, in seat 16A, sat the woman that message was about. At the back of the cabin, the woman kept her eyes fixed on the clouds. The faint reflection of sunlight danced across her face as the memories she had locked away for years began to surface. She remembered the last time she saw those jets, the same kind of F-35s, slicing through the night sky above Syria when she led a mission that no one ever officially acknowledged. Her call sign, Phoenix, had been earned in the fire, not from training, but from surviving the impossible. 5 years ago, she had flown through a storm of missiles to protect an Allied transport plane carrying civilians and soldiers out of a conflict zone. She didn't just escort them. She fought until her jet took damage beyond repair. She ejected seconds before it exploded. They thought she died in that mission. The military declared her missing, presumed dead. She never corrected them. Her life after that was quiet, anonymous. She disappeared, built a life outside the radar. No uniforms, no ranks, no headlines. Just peace. But fate has a way of finding those who try to outrun it. When she boarded Flight 482 that morning, she had no idea that an encrypted passenger manifest would trigger alerts deep inside the Pentagon's air command systems. Her passport, though civilian, was scanned through layers of security, software still connected to classified archives. One name popped up, a code buried in old data. Pitch X016A, Phoenix. The system flagged it instantly. And somewhere, in a secure operations room hundreds of miles away, a red light blinked to life. In the skies above the Atlantic, two F-35 pilots received an urgent directive. You are to intercept civilian Flight 482 transatlantic route. Maintain formation. Do not engage. Identify and confirm presence of call sign Phoenix. They didn't ask why. Orders like that don't need reasons. Not when they come from the top, but when they approached the passenger jet and saw her face through. The glass, that unmistakable calm, the poise even from thousands of feet away, they knew. They had trained under her once. She was the legend whose maneuvers were still taught in flight schools, the one who never came home. Their salute wasn't just protocol, it was respect. Back inside the cabin, the flight attendants had begun serving lunch. Conversations had turned casual again, but a quiet tension lingered in the air. A man sitting across the aisle leaned over and whispered, "You think those jets were following us for a reason?" The woman in 16A gave a faint smile. "Maybe they were just saying hello," she said softly. But her heart knew better. Every detail, their formation, the signal pattern, told her this wasn't coincidence. Someone somewhere knew who she was. Someone had found her. Thousands of miles away, deep inside Langley Air Force Command, a small group of officers stared at the monitor displaying Flight 482's live coordinates. "Sir, confirmation just came through," said an analyst. "Passenger manifest matches the biometric profile." "It's her!" The commanding officer leaned forward, expression unreadable. "After 5 years," he muttered, "Phoenix is alive." He gave a quiet order. "Keep it contained. No public record, just let her fly." But another officer hesitated. "Sir, what if she knows? What if she remembers what happened on Operation Scorched Sky?" The room fell silent. The name of that operation hadn't been spoken aloud in years. An event shrouded in secrecy, one that changed alliances and erased files. "Then," the commander said slowly, "we'll have to see what happens when she lands." Back in the cabin, the woman felt the weight of her past pressing closer. Her reflection in the window seemed to merge with the fading. Horizon and two lives overlapping. The pilot she was and the passenger she pretended to be. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small metal object, a tarnished wing insignia, half burnt, the edges warped by heat. The only thing she kept from her old life. Her fingers brushed over it gently. Memories flooded back. The radio chatter. The blinding light of missile fire. The moment she chose to stay behind so others could escape. And then, the sound of her jet exploding behind her as she fell through the night sky. As darkness settled, Flight 482 cruised under a sea of stars. The cabin was quiet now. Most passengers were asleep. But in the cockpit, the pilots received another encrypted message, short and unnerving. "Upon arrival, await further instruction. Passenger 16A under special clearance." The captain glanced back at the door leading to the cabin, unease growing in his chest. "What kind of passenger are we carrying?" he muttered. He didn't know that history was flying just a few rows behind him, and that the reason the F-35s saluted them was buried in the classified pages of a forgotten war. In seat 16A, the woman watched the moonlight shimmer on the ocean below. Her eyes were heavy, but her mind alert, sensing the invisible lines connecting the past and the present. The jets were gone, but the feeling of being seen, truly seen, lingered. She had hoped to vanish quietly into a normal life. But the sky had other plans. As she drifted into half-sleep, her thoughts echoed through the quiet hum of the engines. If they know I'm alive, what else do they know? Because if Phoenix was back in the air, it meant someone had reopened the files that were never meant to see daylight again. And somewhere beyond the clouds, those who once called her comrade, and those who once called her enemy, were already watching. The ocean stretched endlessly below. Flight 482 as the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon. Most passengers were still asleep, unaware that their flight had become the center of quiet attention across multiple military networks. At 35,000 feet, the hum of the engines felt steady. But in the woman's mind, memories of fire and chaos raged once more. 5 years earlier, the world had been on the edge of a silent war, one not fought in cities or trenches, but in the skies. A rogue military faction had seized control of an air defense network in the Middle East, locking onto Allied satellites and threatening civilian airspace. The operation to stop them was given a name that would never appear in public record. Operation Scorched Sky. The mission was simple on paper. Destroy the control array before the enemy could activate the satellite override. In reality, it was suicide. Leading the mission was Captain Alexandra Hayes, call sign Phoenix, the best pilot the U.S. Air Force had ever produced, known for her precision, discipline, and a quiet intensity that inspired everyone around her. She led a squadron of 6 stealth fighters into the most dangerous airspace on Earth. The night was pitch black when they entered hostile radar zones. The air was thick with static, the clouds glowing faintly from distant explosions. Phoenix flew at the front, her voice calm through the comms even as surface-to-air missiles streaked toward them. "Evasive pattern Delta," she ordered, pulling her F-35 into a steep climb. The others followed. Tracers ripped through the sky beneath them. Inside the cockpit, her heart pounded steadily, not from fear, but from focus. Every movement was instinct, every second survival. The mission went according to plan until the control array, their main target, suddenly shifted location. It wasn't stationary. It was airborne. The enemy had mounted it onto a cargo plane, a flying command base. They were outnumbered and outgunned. And yet Phoenix didn't turn back. She ordered the others to disengage while she went after it alone. The battle that followed lasted only minutes, but would be remembered by every pilot who heard the transmission. Missiles screamed through the clouds. Phoenix's F-35 was hit twice, flames bursting along its wings. But even as alarms blared in her cockpit, she locked onto the target and fired the final shot. Her missile struck true. The sky lit up like dawn as the enemy aircraft disintegrated in midair. Her last transmission before the signal vanished was calm and steady. "Mission complete. Tell them the sky is clear." Then silence. Her jet went down over the desert border, engulfed in fire. No parachute was seen. No beacon was detected. The official record marked her KIA, killed in action. But she didn't die. Hours after the crash, a local rescue team found her barely alive near the wreckage. She had ejected seconds before impact, landing miles away in a barren wasteland. Her injuries were severe. The team that found her was not American. They were civilians working under an international humanitarian group. And so began her new life. She woke up days later in a field hospital. No uniform, no identification. When she realized that the world believed she was gone, she made a choice few could understand. She stayed that way. For years, she lived quietly under a different name. She taught aviation engineering, never mentioning her past. She told no one who she had been. The medals, the ranks, the missions, all locked away in memory. She thought she had buried Phoenix forever, until the sky found her again. Back in the present, the woman in 16A, Alexandra, felt the weight of her past pressing against the glass. The sunrise ahead painted the clouds in gold and crimson, almost identical to the burning sky she had once fallen through. She whispered to herself, "Scorched sky," the words tasting of smoke and memory. Unbeknownst to her, on the ground below, a storm was forming again. At Langley Air Command, the same officers who had confirmed her identity were now in a heated discussion. "She was declared dead for a reason," one of them said sharply. "If she's alive, we need to know who helped her disappear." Another officer replied, "Sir, she wasn't running. She was hiding from us." The commander frowned. "And now she's back, on a flight bound for London, where half the intelligence community will be waiting. We can't afford that exposure. Should we divert the plane?" The commander hesitated. "No, not yet. Let's see who greets her when she lands." He looked at the screen again, where the red marker labeled Phoenix Active blinked softly. At 38,000 feet, turbulence shook the cabin lightly. Alexandra barely moved, but she could feel the shift. Not in the plane, but in her gut. Something was coming. She reached into her jacket and took out a small folded document, old, faded, and partially burned. Inside it was a photo, her squadron standing in front of their jets, smiling. The 6 of them. 5 had their names etched on the memorial wall now. She was the last. Her gaze lingered on one face beside her in the picture, Major Ryan Cole. Her wingman, the only person who knew the full truth about Operation Scorched Sky. And as the engines roared, she realized something chilling. Ryan was the one who had ordered the missile strike that hit her jet. Her thoughts spiraled. Had it been an accident? Or was it meant to erase her and the truth of that mission? She looked out the window again. The clouds rolled endlessly, but her mind was back in the smoke and fire of that night. The radio static, the final words, the blinding flash. She had trusted her command. She had trusted him. But trust, she knew now, could burn just as hot as jet fuel. Meanwhile, in a shadowed office in London Heathrow's restricted terminal, a figure in a dark suit was already waiting. He scrolled through a secure message on his tablet. Flight 482 confirmed inbound. Subject 16A, Phoenix. Approach with caution. He smiled faintly. "Welcome back, Captain Hayes," he murmured. "We've been expecting you." In the cabin, Alexandra closed her eyes, unaware that both the past and the present were now converging. Her mission had ended 5 years ago, but the secrets she thought had died in the fire were still alive and waiting for her to return. As sunlight filled the cabin, painting her face with gold, she whispered the words she once spoke to her squadron before every mission. "The sky remembers everything." And this time it truly... The wheels of Flight 482 touched down at London Heathrow with a gentle shudder. The cabin filled with applause, the usual sign of relief from passengers, who had no idea that the woman sitting quietly in seat 16A had once guided planes through skies far more dangerous. For most, it was just another landing. For her, it was the beginning of the truth catching up. As the plane taxied to the gate, Alexandra Hayes, Phoenix, glanced out the window. 2 figures stood far across the runway near a set of black vehicles. She didn't recognize their faces, but their stance told her everything. Military posture, waiting. She reached into her small bag and touched the scorched insignia once more. Then she straightened, calm as ever. When the doors opened, the passengers filed out one by one. Flight attendants smiled, unaware of the silent tension growing near the exit. The captain stood at the door and gave her a polite nod, but his eyes held quiet confusion. He had seen the coded message earlier. He knew this passenger was someone. Alexandra nodded back and stepped into the jet bridge, the sound of her boots echoing softly against the metal floor. 2 men in plain black suits approached. No words, just a simple gesture, the kind that meant, "You're coming with us." She didn't resist. She'd faced worse skies than this. They guided her into a dark sedan waiting near a private hangar. As the car pulled away from the terminal, Alexandra stared out the window. Fighter jets stood in perfect rows under the gray morning light, silent sentinels of the life she once lived. The car drove through the back gates and stopped in front of a low, concrete building with no signs or flags. Inside, it was all metal walls and security doors. Waiting at the end of the corridor was Major Ryan Cole. For a moment, neither spoke. The man who once flew beside her, her trusted wingman, looked older, worn by guilt. He broke the silence. "We thought you were dead." Her expression didn't change. "You made sure of that, didn't you?" He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. "Alex, you weren't meant to be the target." She stepped closer, voice steady but sharp. "Then who was?" Ryan sighed. "The operation went off book. There were orders I didn't understand, something about classified tech on board that cargo jet. They said you knew too much. When I saw your jet go down, I thought..." He stopped himself. The words hung heavy between them. She stared at him, the memories finally aligning. The hesitation in his voice during that mission, the sudden command override just before her jet was struck. They hadn't been saving her. They had been erasing her. He tried to explain, but she raised a hand. "It doesn't matter now. The truth's already written in the sky. Those 2 F-35s out there, they didn't salute you. They saluted me." Ryan nodded slowly, regret filling his eyes. "They still talk about you, Phoenix. Every new pilot learns your maneuvers. They know you saved hundreds that night. That salute, it wasn't an order. It was respect." For a long moment, there was silence. Only the hum of distant engines outside. Then Alexandra spoke quietly, her gaze distant. "You buried me once, Ryan, but you can't bury what the sky remembers." Hours later, she walked out of the facility under an open sky streaked with orange light. The officials had cleared her, offering discretion in exchange for silence. But she didn't need their approval. She had found her closure. At the edge of the airfield, an F-35 rested on the tarmac, its metallic skin glowing under the setting sun. A young pilot stood beside it, snapping to attention as she passed. "Ma'am," he said softly, "it's an honor. My father flew under your command." She gave him a faint smile. "Then he taught you to look up, not back." The pilot nodded. As she walked past, she raised her hand slightly. Not a salute, but something gentler, a farewell. That evening, as she boarded a small civilian jet bound for home, Alexandra took one last look at the horizon. The clouds burned with the same crimson hue she had once flown through. In their shapes, she saw her squadron, 6 jets flying in perfect formation. And in her heart, she felt the weight finally lift. For years, she had hidden from her past. But now, the sky itself had called her name again. Not as a soldier, not as a ghost, but as a legend reborn. She leaned back in her seat, eyes on the fading light. "The sky remembers everything," she whispered. "And now, but so do I." As the engines roared and the plane lifted into the sunset, a single F-35 broke from the clouds above, dipping its wings in silent salute. Phoenix was home,